Okay, so hello everybody. Thank you, welcome for being here today and taking some time out of your day. My name is Monse, and I will be your interpretive guide for today, and I will help you out with some cool fun facts about the Mojave Desert and the Sonoran Desert that we would find in Joshua Tree. And first of all, I want to let you know that in this facility here that we will find restrooms and water if you would like some. And if you need it at any moment, you can go ahead and get up off your seats and help yourself out to the refreshments or the restrooms as needed. If anybody would like to go and take a moment now, if not, I can go ahead and continue on with my presentation. Does anybody needs to go at the moment?
No.
All right, thank you. So I'll continue on with the presentation, and it begins with the Joshua Tree. As I mentioned that my name is Monse, and I wanted to choose this conversation to talk to you about Joshua Tree because it's a really special place in my heart. I had the best time of my life in Joshua Tree when I was having a hard time in my life, and all the beautiful life that I found there and I saw there in the desert was pretty unimaginable to me at the time, because when you think of a desert, it's kind of barren. You don't really think of much going on there, but in reality there's a lot of life, all the way from the microscopic life that you'd find in the soil all the way to the Yucca bepifolia, the Joshua trees, what they're known for. And I just want to talk to you a little bit about things and the observations that I've had over the years of going there and visiting. And one of them is that as every year as would go by with time and visiting the park, that I would notice more and more people. There's more tourist attractions. There's more of curiosity behind that. And it's fine and it's really good that everybody's interested in national parks, but we all do have a responsibility in playing a role. And when we get there as visitors, there are some small rules that we do need to abide by, like walking through designated pathways, or simply also staying alongside the roads, using specific indicated areas where you can go ahead and park for your vehicles and take pictures so you can get to see the wildlife in a respectable manner, as well as you enjoying the curiosity and the life that Joshua Tree holds for you. But more specifically, my interest really relies on the desert tortoise that you would find there. They're actually really difficult to find in Joshua Tree because over the time, unfortunately, since I mentioned foot traffic has increased at the park, the desert tortoise actually have moved away from the desert floor all the way to the rocky hillsides that you would find in Cottonwood Ranch, similar to the mining area in Joshua Tree. And if you're not familiar with Joshua Tree actually compiles itself into 800 acres of land, actually, excuse me, not feet. It's 800 acres of land, and it actually is compromised between two deserts. It's the Mojave Desert and the Colorado Desert. And Joshua Tree actually expands within a radius of 800 acres, roughly around the park in the San Bernardino County. It's also found in the Riverside Basin, but the two deserts that compile and make up Joshua Tree is going to be the Colorado Desert, and it's also going to be on the Mojave, so that's going to be on the eastern side of it, and that's the low level portion of the desert, so that's below 3,000 feet, so you're actually like close to sea level at that point. And then it compiles itself also of the high desert, which is going to be your Mojave side, so it's a higher, more moisture type of environment, and that's where the Yucca, the Joshua Tree, as you know, the park is known for, is called. By any chance, does anybody know where Joshua Tree came from, the name of the park? By any chance, does anybody know? So the park, it was actually in the mid 19th century, was founded by at least these miners, not necessarily founded, but they resided in the area for a mining company excursion that they would have at the time to use the natural sources found in the soil. And it was founded by Mormon pioneers, and in the biblical sense, because they are Mormon, they ended up calling those trees in that area Joshua trees. But in reality, it's not necessarily called a Joshua tree. It's called a Yucca bepifolia, and it should not also be confused with the Mojave Desert Yucca. There's a difference between them, and in terms of size as well, and elevation between them, but they will be seen along the park alongside, and then that gives you a good indicator that, hey, I am in the Mojave versus being below the 3,000 feet on the other side of the Colorado Desert. And so within these two different types of similar environments, one being low and one being high, I'm going to be specifying a little bit more between the higher level of the desert, being the high desert. And that's where you would find normally our friends here, the desert tortoise as well. And they're difficult to find now slightly because of the type of foot traffic that we get, and not necessarily the foot traffic, because even though as much people would go backcountry, meaning staying off those designated pathways, like I said, that is our responsibility to fulfill. It's actually more so when we drive into the park to get to the actual campsites that we would like, that these little guys unfortunately are kind of taking a blow to that, because as we're driving, we drive kind of fast a little bit, we don't really see a lot of traffic, so we get comfortable. And it's also in times of rain, not just that, these guys are actually known to go ahead and walk. They're slow moving creatures, but they go ahead and walk and have a wide range of where they belong and live and have their meals. And when those rains come, they like to gather around in the middle of the roadway. So you would normally find them as well drinking water there, but just as much as you would find them drinking water, you would also kind of find some dead ones alongside the road, because people did not slow down enough in time in order to give them a chance to have that water, or to move away. So that's something we should consider as we go ahead and visit Joshua Tree, especially for our first time visits. And the most important part of it that is happening as well, not only do they not want to live in the desert flat floor anymore, but they're starting to move onto the hillsides and the rocky sides. We're still not sure exactly why they do that, but one guess is that they might prefer more shade. They also might be moving away from those lands because of the type of vegetation that is around them that probably no longer supports them, given the droughts that we have been occurring in California. And another option would be simply that it might just be easier for them to burrow and hide their eggs in those rocky hillsides versus having to use that energy to go ahead and burrow themselves in onto the ground. So I think that, given all the time that they've managed to survive in this, this intolerable type of environment, they've managed to do so with any little help of us. So my job here for you guys is just to kind of understand that it's important that we all play a role in little small ways to do things. We don't have to drive an electric car to the national park. We don't necessarily have to go ahead and have solar panels on our house in order to make a difference for these animals, but simply staying on those roadways, keeping the minimum speed limit on those roadways when you are going to park, and go ahead into the campsites or observation points within the park. That we give a moment to kind of understand that we're going into somebody else's environment, and we can go ahead and make little small changes just like those. You don't necessarily have to go too far out of your way, but you can also voice your concerns to other people, or to your or advocate for the things that you like, so people can have more interest and understand that there's more than just a desert and some rocks there in Joshua Tree, but there's actually natural forms of life. And which is really good, because I want to keep seeing these little tortoises for the rest of my life as if I can, because their lifespan actually ranges from 50 to 80 years in the wild, or even in captivity as well. That they have a pretty large lifespan, so that's a lot of birthdays. And I know that I would like to celebrate a lot of my own birthdays at Joshua Tree, because it's one of my favorite places. So just to wrap things up in terms of why I want to share these things with you, not only just for my love of Joshua Tree or these tortoises, these creatures, or from the microscopic little tardigrades that live in the sand all the way up to the yucca, but these little guys are actually, they are listed under the Endangered Species Act. So federally we are funded to have studies and also have an interest in protecting them, because they are part of the environment given their lifelong span. The yuccas live of approximately 150 years, and these guys are 80s. So they're kind of roughly in age, like their generation would still live on for that same tree and keep going and going. So I think it's important that we go ahead and protect these guys as well, because as they're slow moving and wide ranging creatures, they have a lot of things to teach us about the environment and in terms of how it's changing, given that we are dealing with droughts, or our spring is coming a little later, climate change. The discussion about climate change is starting to happen, and people are starting to take a little bit more notice as they see differences in weather changes as well. Not just scientists or civilian scientists, but all of us. We kind of notice differences in our environment around us. So, you know, studying little guys who've been here longer than us as well, and they really don't need too much of our help. If we can help them out, then I think it's a really important thing to do. Does anybody have any questions whatsoever about the tortoises, Joshua Tree, or the flowers as well, the Joshua trees themselves?
What are some of the animals that live like in these ecosystems in Joshua Tree?
Right, so it's a pretty flourishing ecosystem. So in the daytime, you'd probably have your normal species of birds, lizards, different types of burrowing animals, kind of like a squirrel. They kind of live in between rockways. They kind of get closer to plants. Now what's happening, given the amount of people that go in, certain species of birds like ravens or pigeons are starting to go ahead and flock there. They're not from that area, but they're doing so by following the visitors as well because of their food. So that's probably a new visitor, a new type of species that will be there. Other than that, you'd probably have also types of coyotes, given on the terms, the place in the ranch, in Cottonwood Ranch, or different ranches found within the park as well. Since it's so large, you would find different forms of mountain goats or sheep as well in some hillsides. And that would be more on the high desert side versus the Colorado desert that I mentioned before. So those are just a few creatures that you would find there normally. And bats at night. They'd also like to go ahead and they're next to the large saguaro cacti, all of that. So all of those types of plants, some animals and birds burrow in there, live there, and have more that form of life and activity at night versus daytime because it's so hot. So I hope that answered your question. Does anybody else have a question?
Do they have a natural predator?
They do have a natural predator, and I would say that it would be, I don't want to say necessarily coyotes, but given if they haven't had a meal and they happen to cross to it, I definitely think it can be their next meal. But I would say more so that it's predatory birds at this point. Since they are slow moving and sometimes they do travel within a pair sometimes, then I think at that point that they can be a huge target for predators.
So what do they eat?
Oh, they eat, the desert tortoise eats vegetable matter. If in captivity, they also have fruit. I would say that they have different types of shrub or material, vegetable material that they find in the park. But it depends on where you're talking in the park, because they're not necessarily all spread out given the environment that they're at. If there's a lot of people, I think they would try to push away. And it's important that we understand our actual literal footprint that we have, because if we step too much in areas that we're not supposed to, we're not allowing for their food to grow. So it just depends where in the park that we're talking about, but they're herbivores. I can comfortably say that, yeah.
Because of the climate change, do we have less Joshua trees or the same like 20 years ago?
We definitely have less. So as the time is going on and climate is increasing, also the way that the Joshua trees are reproducing is at a slower level. So given that where they're at now, if we don't move them within like the 20 years or 15 years that we have, possibly they will go extinct for the next 50 years. So slowly they're making their way at slower levels to the point where we probably won't see them if we don't take care of them now. And that has an effect as well, and you will probably also see that with the same type of trend with the tortoises, because as drought occurs more often, these tortoises are also beginning to decline in terms of their survival rate against the odds in life in the desert, and as well as in terms of their water supply. because these are so unique to the point where they can hold the last water that they have in their bladder to the point where they can literally change their pH in their body just to hold on to that same water. So they can resist high levels of urea found in your urine and survive off of that, versus other animals and other creatures would die at that point because it's maybe point of toxicity. So that's another really interesting part that I like about them as well. Yeah. Would anybody like to see a picture of the yucca tree by any chance? And I have more information if I didn't reach any points that you guys were looking for. I do have a sign-up sheet that you guys can get emails and information about BioTrack as well, since we do believe in having a sustainable earth because it is finite. So we believe in having protections and, you know, just reaching the curiosity of people in order for us to make changes in the planet. So if you guys are interested, you can ask me questions after the talk or go ahead and have the sign-up sheet, but that would wrap up my talk on Mojave Desert and the desert tortoise. And you guys are all welcome to go ahead and pass around my friend. Thank you guys.